Well, greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome to this night-ending bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost you a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into this night-ending bonus upload, shall we? Today's first terrifying experience. Okay, so I've been a skeptic of the creepy and paranormal my entire life. I've really never kind of believed in that stuff, but things I've heard and witnessed at my grandparents' farm shakes me to the core. My grandparents own a large plot of land in central Missouri, and they've owned that land for around 40 years. I've been to that farm over 10 times, and every time I go, I always get this terrifying feeling that something's watching me. Like there's always something behind my back. I've also had many strange encounters that are just downright bizarre. My first encounter with whatever the heck this thing was when I was around 7 or 9. I'm currently 14. We had brought in our dog named Spot to the farm. He was a silver lab who I loved dearly. I was exploring in the forest behind the house, just enjoying the summer breeze, when my dog started to growl. A deep, sinister growl that I've never heard him make. I turned around quickly to see what he was growling at, but could see nothing but the forest. While my eyes were scanning the area where my dog was growling, some animal shot out of the brush so fast I could barely see what it was. And before I knew it, it was gone. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, absolutely flabbergasted by what I had just witnessed. From what I could see of it, it looked like a coyote, but the speed at which it moved was absolutely insane. It moved at like 90 miles an hour and made almost no noise. But the most creepy part was that the place it had jumped out of didn't make an imprint of where it was lying, and from where I viewed it jumping up, I should have been able to easily see where it was hiding. Shocked by what I had witnessed, I just decided that was enough and went back to the inside of the home where I was safe. My second experience happened when I was around 10. I was visiting the place, and like usual, I was getting that feeling of being watched. That first day was normal. Nothing really creepy happened. I was just spending quality time with the family. But when night came, that's when crap started happening. I was trying to sleep in a twin bed that had been my mom's brother when he lived there. When I heard this tapping, not tiny little taps, but loud taps, almost like banging, it was coming from the direction of the window. I sat up and looked at the window, but nothing was there, so I assumed it was just some animal or something like that. 5 minutes passed, no tapping. I was drifting off to sleep when boom! This time, not a tap, a slam, a loud slam directly into the window. I'm not talking about like a hit. It sounded as if something absolutely massive had hit the window. I shot up so quickly I nearly passed out. I decided enough was enough and grabbed the flashlight in the drawer and shined it out the window. Nothing. 10 seconds passing, nothing. I was about to go crawl into my mom's bed when I heard it. A screech that is not achievable by a human, so loud it pierced the quiet, peaceful summer evening. I can't put it into words what it sounded like, but It was dark and horrible, and I still remember it to this day. I froze, unable to move a muscle, I was so scared. I was sitting there still as a statue, petrified by what I had heard. That's when my instincts kicked in, and they told me to run to my mom's room, which I did. For some reason, I didn't wake her up. I just cuddled up next to her and didn't sleep the entire night. All I could think of was that sound, that horrible, terrible, bloody screech. My next encounter was when I was around 13. I was back at my grandparents' just enjoying my time like I usually do when my grandfather suggested we go deer watching. I agreed because I'd been doing this since as long as I could remember, and it was never an issue. It was always extremely fun. So we took the Polaris and went out at around 7 o'clock at night to look for some deer. We decided to go in the easternmost pasture because that's usually where we spot the most deer. 30 minutes pass, and we had seen a few deer, but not as much as we normally do. Then things start to get really creepy. I get that feeling again, that dreadful feeling that something is there in the shadows watching me. But this time, it's a lot more intense. It's like it's right behind me. But when you look, it's not there. This time it appears that my grandfather feels that same presence as I do. Just to let you all know, my grandfather's a very laid-back individual, always joking and having a laugh. The only time I've ever seen him very serious is when my great-uncle died a couple years back. So when I started feeling that I was being watched, my grandfather goes from happy and laid back to very serious and alert. He gripped the wheel so tight his knuckles had turned white and was constantly looking around, making sure nothing was following us. He then made this massive U-turn out of nowhere and started to head back to the house. I asked what he was doing. When he replied, "We're heading back to the house," his tone of voice was cold, like he had witnessed someone being murdered. At this point, he was gripping the wheel even harder and was absolutely going pedal to the metal full speed back. I decided not to ask any more questions until we got back home, which we did in no time at all. Once we were there, he rushed me into the house, constantly checking over his back and making sure nothing was there. When we were inside, he had closed and locked the door. His behavior was very alarming. It was really shocking me to my core. I decided that all of the stuff I had witnessed was enough and only asked him one question. "What is going on here?" When I asked that, he looked at me and gave me a very cold expression and said, "I have some things I need to explain." We then sat down for 30 minutes, and he explained that whatever this thing had been living on his property since the day they moved in. He and my mother had experienced the same thing that was happening to me for their first few years living here. He explained that he has seen whatever this thing is, and that it does not like new visitors, hence why I was experiencing all of these problems. He told me all about the things that he had witnessed and experienced, and they seemed to have been pretty similar to what was happening to me. He told me that he knew this was going to happen to me, and that he was always watching to make sure I never got hurt because he knew this creature better than anyone else. We talked some more, but all of it was the same. It was now late, and he decided that I couldn't sleep alone, so he had me sleep with my mom. We luckily promptly left the next morning. I have not been back there since. My last encounter. This encounter isn't really an encounter. Two things that had happened at my grandparents' farm. Recently, we brought my sister's horse to the farm. The first night for the horse was hell. My sister's horse has always been very friendly and not shy. But that first night of my sister's horse being at the farm was bizarre. The next morning, my grandfather woke up and was doing his usual chores and went to feed the horse. And he noticed that the horse was acting very weird, extremely shy and timid. But when he took a better look, he was shocked. The horse had 3 10-inch gashes on its side like something had clawed at it. It was ruled out that the horse ran into a fence, but I think otherwise. Also, around that same time, my grandparents adopted a dog named Panda. Panda was a Jack Russell Terrier who was 2 months of age. 5 days later, he was found dead with deep puncture wounds in his body, with his neck slashed. They ruled out bobcat or mountain lion. We don't know what it was. Well, I do, and my grandfather does as well. Today's second experience. I saw this thing in or near the woods on 3 separate occasions now. Each time I've seen this thing, it was in a different state along the east coast of America. And each time of the sighting was fleeting. I'm in my 30s now, and the sightings have several years between them. The first time I saw it, I was in high school. And this is most definitely the time I got the longest look at it. The second time I only caught a glimpse, and I'm pretty sure but not entirely sure it was the same thing. The third time I got a clear look at it from a distance, but it caught me off guard, and I ended up stumbling while taking a step and lost sight of it. I've been calling it a thing because I have no idea what it is, and quite honestly, I don't even have a good guess either. It's not a Sasquatch or a lizard person or any other creature I have found through my incredibly frustrating recent internet research on this subject matter. Maybe a shapeshifter of some sorts, because the first time I saw it, this thing changed its form for sure. If you are someone like me that relies on science for validation, you try and keep an open mind, but you also tend to explain away people's paranormal experiences for any number of different reasons. Also, I would have expected that if I ever did end up seeing something otherworldly, it might be something that someone else had seen before, right? I might see something I recognize from a television show or a movie, and I might say, look up there, it's a UFO, or holy crap, a ghost, or my God, Bigfoot, kill it. This thing, though, y'all, this thing, it was so surreal, so deranged looking, I'm really at a loss. This is the first time that I have shared this with anyone, and if it weren't for the last encounter, I would have forgotten about the first 2. I have never mentioned this to anyone because of how ridiculous it sounds, the fact that I have no proof, and the fact that I am a known F about. I'm pretty much exactly the person you would think might make something like this up. At this point, though, I only want to get this off my chest to hopefully find out if anyone else has ever seen this thing. Before I begin telling you what had happened, I would like to make it clear that I swear what you are about to hear is the truth about what I saw as best as I can remember. If you don't believe it, whatever, I get that. This is the reason why I'm sharing it. And one thing I have never and will never tell anyone I might have to see in my daily life. I am sure they would think I was crazy or desperate for attention, because what I saw is so downright absurd. Well, now that I have thoroughly destroyed any credibility I may have once had, I'll attempt to explain the details about what I saw as bluntly as possible, with as vivid of a recollection as I have of the events. The first sighting, southern New Hampshire, 2000 or 2001, summer. I don't remember exactly when, well after midnight. I'm going to take some time and explain this first encounter in as much detail as I can recall, even though it happened so fast, literally lasting a total of maybe 10 seconds. It is still the longest amount of time I have spent truly looking at this thing. I was walking to a friend's house from the apartment complex I lived in late at night. To get from one place to another quickly, you had to go through this small patch of forest, roughly 100 yards, that was technically someone else's property. And a couple of times before we had someone shine a flashlight at us, and they even fired a shot in the air trying to scare us in an attempt to get us to stop cutting through. It never really did stop us. It did, however, teach us to be more stealthy while cutting through. And so on this night I was creeping very quietly through the trees as I went. The forest is in a valley between my apartment complex, some houses, and the neighborhood where my friend lived. The valley dipped down in the middle with a steep incline surrounding it. And So at first, I had to go down into the valley, and then at the end, I would walk up out of the valley, exiting the tree line right onto the street where my friend's house was. Once exiting the tree line, one would be standing on the side of the street, with the end of the road about a half a mile to your right and the entrance to the neighborhood about the same distance to the left. The houses were spaced apart decently, so the night was very dark except for the area around the houses and a couple of light circles under the orange street lamps, of which there were very few for the amount of space. I got through the valley with no problem at this time, and I got some speed going up the hill in front of me, where the forest ended maybe 5 feet from the edge of the street, if the event was that far. At that exact moment, I came out of the tree line and onto the edge of the road. Something caught my eye to the left of me emerging from the woods across the street. It stumbled awkwardly out of the dark woods and into view, right at the edge of the circle of orange light radiating down from one of the street lamps. At first, and for just a brief moment, it looked like a shadow. However, I heard a sound coming from the dead leaves beneath its feet, and I quickly realized that it was not a shadow. Its body was like that of a starving child, maybe 3 feet tall, that you may see in a third world country, but its legs and arms were so thin that they appeared to be no way able to support this creature's body weight. It was dark, but from what I can remember, at the ends of its frail-looking limbs were just nubs, no hands or feet that I saw. Its movements were the creepiest part, honestly, and they were the first thing that threw me off. I can't even really explain how absurd and unnatural its movements were, or how it was even standing on those tiny legs. It moved forward from the trees and toward the street extremely awkwardly, with a couple of steps that I saw it take. It was almost as if it was not supposed to be able to walk around like that, but it somehow figured out how to do it regardless. The thing was roughly 3 feet tall, with an enlarged light bulb-shaped head and a little belly, in spite of how thin the rest of its frame was. In addition to its shape and motion, the thing seemed unreal, mostly because it didn't seem to reflect any light at all when it stepped into the light of the street lamp. It appeared to have no three-dimensional form at all, with its body almost blending right into its shadow. And I could only really tell that it had solid form by the way it moved and navigated the environment around it. I froze in place instantly when I saw it, with my brain unable to even process what I was seeing. In a couple of steps, it exited the trees, stumbled across the patch of grass to the street, and then sort of fumbled down forward toward the sewer drain on the right side of the road. I'm not sure what I did, if anything, but as soon as it hit the curb, it rose back up and looked over at me. I couldn't see its face or anything at all, just this bizarre black shape moving so unbelievably awkward. I really can't stress this enough. Its movements were ridiculously uncoordinated. What happened next is what sent me fleeing back into the woods with all of the cowardness that has kept me alive to this day. Upon seeing me, this malformed shadow child-like thing did this quick twisted turn toward me, dropped down onto all fours, and became much more animal-like shape when it did. I again have no idea how to describe the motion, as it was so unnatural, but when its turn was complete, the thing had become something I can only describe as a shadow dog, cat, or bear. I know it sounds crazy, but I can't describe it in any other way other than that. It stood on all fours like a predatory animal, but I couldn't make out any definition on it, with the way it didn't catch the light that it was standing directly below. This thing, it didn't just go from being human-like to being a human on all fours. I mean, it genuinely became something else as far as I could tell. I debated leaving this next part out because it just slices into the credibility of the events even further. But it happened, and here goes. As soon as this creature had hit all fours and was no longer humanoid, its eyes flashed yellow at me, and it let out a loud shriek, not a growl, and not a bark, not a snarl, not an animal-like roar, or even a hissing, but a legitimate shriek that sounded like neither a person nor an animal. The sound started quiet, then rose quickly, almost as if it was winding up or under pressure, and just painfully being forced out of this creature's mouth in great anguish. Its scream had a certain harshness to it, as if it may have had seriously something wrong with its vocal cords, or it had smoked a million cigarettes consecutively. I remember the thing had a weird, almost scared vulnerability to the sound it had made, which contrasted the harshness and tone as well as the defensive stand this creature had taken. All this took place with just a few seconds, maybe 10 at most, from the time the thing exited the tree line to the time it turned, postured, shrieked at me, and sent me running back into the woods without a single thought in my head. I didn't stop, I didn't look back, I didn't try to be quiet running through the woods, I just ran as fast as I could. Yeah, that's correct, I was so scared, I ran back into the dark, the scary woods to get away, only realizing how dumb that was some time after. The sound it made chilled me to my core. Then, but now, in hindsight, I think the flashing eyes bothered me more than the sound because it was so unexpected. The flashing, glowing eyes trope is precisely what I have heard in so many other people's experiences I never believed about mysterious creatures they claim to have encountered. I mean, because that is what scary things in the night do, right? They flash yellow eyes and make a scary shrieking sound. Obviously, what else do they do? I never made it to my friend's house that night, and I never mentioned this to anyone since. I managed to forget about this experience pretty quickly, although I am not sure how my life was so high drama at that time. So I am sure it was because I did something stupid and that took over my world. The second sighting happened in Central Florida, 2006, spring. Early night, maybe 8 p.m. This is much briefer, and as I mentioned before, I am 90% sure it was the same thing, but I'm not entirely sure. I'll keep this short and tell you simply, I was out camping, went for a walk along a trail, watched my girlfriend hop from rock to rock across the river. I heard a sound to my left, and when I turned to look, I saw an extremely thin, skinny, black, nubbed leg, possibly a tail, disappear behind a tree, as if an animal was running away from something. I ran over this time but found nothing, and I didn't mention it to my girlfriend. No experiences, no weird sounds that night, and no more encounters for several years after. The third sighting, the eastern shore of Virginia, June 8th, 2019, approximately 11 p.m. Well, here's the reason I felt I needed to share this, the reason I am so freaked out. I was at a party at a friend's house celebrating her birthday because she is one of those people in their 30s that still gets excited about those things. I don't drink. So, I wasn't drunk, but in the interest of total transparency, I have been known to partake in the occasional medicinal herbal supplement for recreational purposes. You can take that information however you'd like. My friend lives with her husband in a farmhouse surrounded by open fields for a couple of acres in any direction, surrounded, of course, by a thick forest. I'd been there for a while, and the thing was the furthest thing in my mind. We were all just hanging out, rambling on about the usual insane BS. I decided that I wanted to smoke, and so I went out the front door onto their porch. I stepped forward and went to step down the front steps to get a little more space, and as I did, I glanced up. And out into the field in front of the house, there it was, roughly 50 yards out, and bumbling through the field toward the trees. For a split second, I could see the unmistakable shape of this weird shadow child thing. It was just the same as before, large head and belly, unbelievably thin in arms and legs, and again reflecting absolutely no light at all. I was in mid-step when I glanced up and lost track of where I was stepping, causing me to fall forward. I managed to catch myself as I barely and must have made a sound when I did, because when I looked up, the thing was on all fours and quickly running like a dog off into the woods. I reiterate, this thing did not move on all fours like a person in any way, but it moved like an animal with knees bent backward. I was too far, and it happened too fast for me to tell if it had hands or feet. I started to walk out and look around a bit when someone came outside, and not wanting to tell anyone, I just went back to the party. I must have been distant the rest of the night because I couldn't get it out of my head. I ended up leaving the party relatively early and went home and started obsessing about this, as I've been. So, I am sufficiently freaked out by a lot of things about what I have seen. Even discounting the second sighting, I got 2 brief but good looks at something I cannot explain. What I saw that night was so unnatural, I never expected to see anything like it in my life. It honestly just did not belong in our physical reality. And it almost didn't even seem to fit in the environment around it, as if it's something 2D superimposed into an authentic 3D background. I looked into shadow people videos and sightings, but I don't think this was that, as there was nothing ghostly about what I saw. It was there and had a solid form. This thing, it was so out of place, but at the same time I saw it there and heard it as well. I don't know what else to say about it, except the second time I could see enough of it that I could tell it was not somebody messing with me, and I could see enough of it to say that it did not belong in this world with us. My best guess at this point is that it and I crossed each other's paths in possible interdimensional rift or time slip only because of how surreal the experiences were. I know it sounds crazy, but it is all I have come up with to rationalize the fact that this thing did not fit into the surroundings in any way. It didn't even look like it was made to move, to get around in this world. The force of gravity should have, for sure, crushed its skinny legs under the weight of its body. It was like an eggplant on toothpicks. I need a reasonable answer from somewhere at this point, because I know what I saw, and I can't get the way this thing moved or how dark it was out of my head. Alright folks, there you have it, this night-ending bonus upload. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is your support, after all, that keeps this channel growing and going, and honestly, what gives people a chance and a place to share their experiences, theories, and ideas judgment-free, simply treated with the respect that we all deserve. Thank you. Everyone, please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, friends. These creatures are real. They are out there and dangerous. Share this information with the people you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for answers, and God bless.